The smell of Cellblock B wasn't sterile. It was primal. Steel, stale fear, and the heavy, musky pheromones of dozens of highly stressed alphas filled the air, all competing for dominance. I, newly arrived and freshly processed, felt like a fragile flower thrown into a pit of lions. My Omega suppression patch was peeling at the corner. I pressed a hand to my neck, trying to keep the calming medication in place. I had to appear beta. If they sensed my true nature, my life would be measured in minutes. The intake guard shoved me hard against the bars of cell 14. Welcome to the block, Omega. Try not to cause trouble. Especially not with the king. The king. Every inmate I'd passed had spoken the name with reverent fear. I didn't know who he was, but the title alone iced my veins. I had only been in the cell for an hour when the low murmurs from the surrounding cells, sharp, possessive shifts in scent, told me I was being watched. My only strategy was invisibility. The noise of the block died suddenly. A heavy, absolute silence settled over the room, signaling the arrival of someone who commanded it. He walked with an arrogance even the warden couldn't replicate. Not in a uniform, but in a pressed black t-shirt and gray state-issued pants. His powerful physique radiating casual, terrifying dominance. Tall, arms covered in dark tattoos, sharp, handsome, and ruthless. This had to be him, the king. As he approached cell 14, the other alphas dropped their gazes. He moved slowly, deliberately, scanning the bars. When he stopped in front of me, his shadow fell across my body. His scent hit me like a wave, wood smoke, dark earth, raw alpha dominance. It pressed down on me, forcing my spine to curve in an involuntary gesture of submission. I kept my eyes lowered, trying to control the tremor threatening to betray me. New blood. His voice rumbled, low and commanding. You smell clean. I remained silent, praying the patch had fooled him. He reached out, gripping the bars beside my head, trapping me against the metal. His presence pressed into me, searching for the truth beneath the chemical disguise. The rules of this block are simple, he said, voice dropping to a possessive murmur. Anything of value belongs to me. Information, favors. His dark eyes bored into mine. Or, if it suits me, inmates. A hostile mid-ranking alpha in cell 16 scoffed. Leave the kid alone, Rhys. He's just another weak beta. So his name was Rhys. He didn't even glance away from me. The air around him flared with lethal intent, a palpable wave of hostility toward the challenger. He is not a beta, Rhys said, eyes locking on mine, piercing my facade. He is an Omega, a rare commodity in a place like this. My blood ran cold. The patch had failed. Or perhaps my terror had leaked through. A sweet, panicked scent that shone like a beacon to a predator of his caliber. The game was over before it had begun. Kale growled. An Omega? Here? Impossible. Rhys's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nothing is impossible in my territory. I can smell the truth beneath that chemical lie, like trying to hide a rose in a sewer. Futile. He didn't touch me, not yet, but his presence was a physical weight. My body, traitorous Omega biology, responded against my will. A faint warmth spread through my veins, a silent, primal recognition of him. I locked my knees, fighting the instinct to bare my neck. You will remove the patch, he commanded. My hand trembled as I lifted it from my neck. The flimsy patch came away with a soft tear. The moment it was gone, my true scent, sweet, floral, and undeniably Omega, bloomed in the air. Collective inhalations echoed from the surrounding cells. Hungry eyes pinned on me from every shadow. Rhys's own scent spiked with something darkly satisfied. There. Now you are as you were meant to be. Kale slammed a fist against his bars, the clang reverberating through the sudden silence. He doesn't belong to you just because you saw him first, Rhys. An Omega is a prize for the whole block. We should draw lots. In a blur, Rhys moved. Calm, controlled predator gone. In its place, raw fury, crackling through the air. You challenge my claim? His voice was a soft, deadly whisper, yet it carried across the block. He didn't wait for an answer. With one brutal jerk, He ripped open Kale's unlocked door. Metal screeched. What followed was a blur. Grunts, flesh hitting flesh, a symphony of violence. Less than a minute later, Kale lay motionless. Silence returned. Rhys stepped back to my cell, smearing a bit of blood from his knuckles onto his pants. His gaze settled on me, absolute and possessive. "Let that be a lesson to all of you," he said. "This Omega is under my protection. His scent is mine. His safety is mine. His life is mine. To look at him with desire is to challenge me. To touch him is to forfeit your life." He reached through the bars, fingers brushing the gland on my neck. The touch was electric. A whimper escaped me, the first truly Omega sound I had allowed myself to make. Rhys's eyes darkened with possessive fire, more terrifying than any violence. "Welcome to your new cage, little Omega," he murmured, thumbs circling the gland in a slow, claiming motion. "You wanted to be invisible, but now you belong to a king." The silence after Rhys's proclamation was thicker than the prison walls themselves. The only sound was the frantic drum of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. His thumb still rested on my scent gland, a brand of ownership that felt terrifying, humiliating, and in some raw, primitive corner of me, safe. Then a new voice cut through the tension, smooth as worn stone, and just as unyielding. "A king who hoards a treasure is a king who invites a war, Rhys." Every head, including Rhys's, turned toward the farthest, darkest cell 1. The man inside sat mostly in shadow, but I could make out the tall, lean silhouette, his posture relaxed, not desperate or caged. Silas, the former king. Even his name carried a weight that shifted the air. Rhys's hand dropped from my neck, but his presence didn't recede. If anything, it grew sharper. "Silas," he said, voice low, vibrating with warning. "Your wisdom arrives as punctually as the dawn. Treasures need to be shared," Silas replied, tone casual, too casual, "or they become a tyrant's folly." He tilted his head slightly, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You claim the Omega for yourself. You silence one challenger with your fists. But can you silence the envy festering in every other heart?" His gaze slid briefly, chillingly, toward me. "You've not secured a prize. You've lit a fuse." My blood froze. He was right. Rhys's protection painted a target on me just as clearly as it shielded me. Rhys stepped forward, blocking my view of Silas entirely, his voice dropping to a dangerous murmur. "Are you offering to share the burden, old man?" A dry, humorless laugh drifted from the shadows. "I am offering you a choice. You can be the king who was brought down by a single sweet scent." His voice softened, though it somehow felt even sharper. "Or you can be the king who understands that true power isn't in possession." He paused. I felt his gaze land on me, heavy and knowing. "But in alliance." The word didn't hiss like a threat. It weighed like a promise. Rhys said nothing. The entire block held its breath, caught in the space between two kings. I watched his shoulders, the slight rise and fall as he weighed brute strength against strategy, instinct against intellect. Finally, he turned halfway, his eyes finding mine again. The raw possession was still there, dark and unmistakable. But something else flickered underneath now. Calculation, recognition, realization. He wasn't just looking at an Omega anymore. He was looking at leverage, at a catalyst, at a key piece on a board I hadn't even known existed. And in that moment I understood. The game had changed, and I had just become part of it. The following days were a lesson in a new kind of tension. It was no longer the simple, brutal fear of being discovered. It was the intricate, suffocating pressure of being a contested prize in a silent war. Rhys did not move me to his cell. That, I slowly realized, would have been a declaration of all-out war. Not just against Kale's friends, but against Silas and the old guard who still looked to the former king for guidance. Instead, Rhys's protection was a constant, invisible cage around me. My meals appeared on my cot, extra rations sometimes, a piece of fruit, a chunk of real bread, that made the other inmates glare with raw hunger. When we were let out for the hour of yard time, a space would clear around me. It wasn't out of respect. It was the way animals give a wide berth to something that belongs to the apex predator. Rhys would never be seen walking directly with me, but he was always there, a dark sentinel watching from the highest point of the yard, his gaze a physical weight. It was more isolating than being ignored. The only one who seemed willing to breach the invisible barrier was Silas. It started in the library, a dusty, neglected room that was more for show than for use. I was hiding between shelves of legal textbooks, seeking a moment away from the staring eyes. His voice, that calm, weathered stone, made me jump. "The laws of sentient species," Silas said, his finger tracing the spine of a thick book, a dry red, but it lays out the very framework that put us all in here. Including you, I'd wager. I pressed myself back against the shelves, saying nothing. He looked older in the light, his face a map of fine lines, but his eyes were young, sharp, and missed nothing. "You don't have to be afraid of me, boy," he said, leaning against the opposite shelf. "Unlike our impulsive king, I believe in conversation. I'm merely curious. What is your crime?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "I didn't do it." The words were out before I could stop them, pathetic and weak. A faint smile touched his lips. "No one in here did it. That is our collective mantra. But you are different. You're not a fighter. You're not a killer. You're a rabbit in a den of wolves. Which makes me wonder, were you placed here by mistake? Or were you placed here on purpose?" The question hung in the air, more terrifying than any accusation. On purpose. The thought had haunted me since my arrest, a ghost I couldn't catch. "Rhys thinks I'm a commodity," I whispered, against my better judgment. "Rhys sees the world in terms of strength and weakness. It is a simple, effective lens. But it has blind spots." Silas lowered his voice. "He sees an omega and thinks only of possession. I see an omega and I wonder, what strings are attached to you? Who is holding them? And what do they want to make this entire block do?" He pushed off the shelf and walked away, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the damp prison air. That night, the tension broke. It was in the communal showers, the steam providing a fragile veil. I was hurrying, my skin crawling with the feeling of being watched. A hand shot out from behind a concrete pillar, grabbing my arm. It wasn't Rhys. It was a hulking alpha with a scar down his face. Gray, one of Kale's old crew. "The king isn't here to hold your hand, pretty thing," he snarled, his scent aggressive and sour. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." Panic seized me, pure and blinding. I struggled, but his grip was like iron. The other inmates in the shower watched, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity on their faces. No one moved to help. "Let him go." The voice didn't roar. It was a quiet, deadly command that cut through the steam. Rhys stood at the entrance, water sluicing down the hard planes of his chest, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was utterly still, but the air around him vibrated with lethal promise. Gray froze, but his grip didn't loosen. "He's not yours, Rhys. Not really. Not by any law. The only law that matters in this block is me," Rhys said, taking a single step forward. "You have 3 seconds to decide if your hand is worth keeping." The standoff lasted a lifetime. Gray's eyes darted, looking for support that wasn't there. With a final, hateful glare at me, he shoved me away. I stumbled, slipping on the wet floor. I expected Rhys to launch himself at Gray, to repeat the brutal spectacle of my first day. But he didn't. He walked past Gray as if he were nothing, his focus entirely on me. He stopped before me, his large body shielding me from the view of the others. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, for me alone. I could only shake my head, trembling uncontrollably. His jaw tightened. He looked from my frightened face back to Gray, and then his gaze swept over every single inmate in the room. "This is your only warning," he announced, his voice echoing in the tiled room. "The next one who touches what is mine will not be punished by me." He paused, letting the words sink in. "He will be given to Silas." A ripple of genuine, profound fear went through the crowd. A beating from Rhys was a temporary, physical thing. Being given to Silas, that was an unknown, a fate that promised something far worse than a broken bone. Rhys didn't wait for a reaction. He took my arm, his grip firm but not painful, and guided me out of the showers. He didn't take me back to my cell. He led me straight to his. It was larger, cleaner, and held the overwhelming, permanent imprint of his scent. He closed the door, the lock clicking into place with a finality that stole my breath. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Silas was right. Hoarding you is a provocation. He ran a hand through his damp hair, a rare sign of frustration. So we changed the strategy. From now on, you stay here, with me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was what he'd wanted from the start. But it felt different now. It wasn't just a claim of desire. It was a tactical move. The next time someone lays a hand on you, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly murmur as he stepped closer, I won't be giving warnings. I will end them, and everyone who stood with them. He was so close I could feel the heat from his body. The war for Cellblock B was escalating, and I was no longer just the prize. I was the king's gambit, and I was now living in the lion's den. Living in Rhys's cell had become a form of exquisite torture. It was the safest and most dangerous place in the entire prison. The threat from other alphas had vanished, replaced by the constant, suffocating pressure of his presence. His scent was everywhere, on the sheets, in the air I breathed. It was a low, persistent hum against my senses, a reminder that my primal biology recognized him as my protector, my jailer, and my deepest, most forbidden desire all at once. He rarely spoke. His communication came in gestures. A pointed look toward the sink meant it was my turn. Plate pushed toward me meant eat. His dominance was a silent language I was forced to learn. It was during the third night that the silence finally broke. I lay on my bunk, facing the wall, pretending to sleep. I could hear the steady, deep rhythm of his breathing from the bunk below. Then it stopped. Who put you here, Omega? His voice was quiet in the dark, but it hit like a gunshot. I froze. I didn't answer. I know you're awake. Your scent spiked the second I spoke. He paused. I'm not asking for your life story. I rolled over, peering down at him in the faint light. He lay on his back, hands behind his head, staring at the bottom of my bunk. Why? I whispered. He turned his head, and even in the gloom, I felt the intensity of his gaze. I need to know what I'm shielding you from, so I know what's coming. The confession tore itself from me. I was a data analyst for the Omegan Rights Accord. I was compiling a report about alpha suppressants being funneled into prisons. I swallowed hard. The company was Ethelberg Pharmaceuticals. I was arrested for corporate espionage the day before I was supposed to testify. My lawyer vanished. My evidence was wiped. Silence followed. He didn't speak, didn't move. I could feel him processing. I could feel the weight of his mind turning over the threat I had revealed. Finally, he shifted, sitting up slightly. The dim light traced the sharp lines of his face. Then they weren't just after you. They were after the truth. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. My throat was tight. He reached out, brushing a hand over the back of mine, tentative but steady. And now they've found their mark, he murmured. But I won't let them touch you. The words were a vow. And even in the oppressive darkness of the cell, I believed him. Rhys didn't move, didn't even breathe. But something in the air snapped tight, like a wire stretched to breaking. Ethelberg, he repeated, voice low, dangerous. Of course it is. You know them, I whispered. I know the kind of men who run them. His jaw flexed. I could see the muscle tick even in the dark. And now you're here, he murmured. Because you got too close. My voice cracked. I didn't expect prison. I thought they'd fire me, maybe smear my name. Not this. Rhys sat up slowly, elbows on his knees, head bowed. The posture would have looked vulnerable on anyone else. On him, it was lethal control. You were never meant to leave that courtroom alive, he said quietly. Prison is the cleanest way to make someone disappear. The words punched the breath from my lungs. You think they'll come for me here? A humorless, dark smile curved his mouth. They already have. He looked up at me then, really looked, and for the first time I understood what made the other alphas fear him. His eyes weren't just sharp. They were calculating, predatory, and furious. You were placed in Block B without being processed. No Omega markers logged. No medical bracelet. No suppressants in your intake file. His voice grew colder. Someone erased you. My skin went cold. You noticed all that? I notice everything. His gaze swept over me like a command. You're not here by accident. Someone wanted you in the most unstable alpha-dominant block in the penitentiary. Someone expected you to die. My heart pounded painfully in my chest. And you think they'll try again? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up. No warning. No explanation. Just a sudden, overwhelming presence as he reached for the ladder and climbed up toward me. For a split second, instinct screamed at me to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The bunk was too small. His hand braced beside my hip, caging me against the wall. His voice was a low growl. Not angry at me, angry for me. They won't touch you again, he said. Not while you're under my protection. I swallowed hard. Why? You barely know me. His eyes burned into mine. I don't need to know you, he murmured. I just need to know they want you dead. And that makes you mine to protect. My breath hitched. He leaned in. Not enough to touch, but enough that his scent wrapped around me, warm and overwhelming. Something primal thrummed deep in my chest, responding to him despite every rational part of me screaming that this was dangerous. You're shaking, he said softly. I'm not. Don't lie. Not to me. His hand moved, slowly, deliberately, to rest over mine. Not grabbing, just grounding. You survived whatever they did to put you here, he said. But Block B is different. These men smell weakness. If you want to live, you listen to me. You stay close. You don't go anywhere alone. I nodded before I could stop myself. After a long moment, he exhaled and finally moved away, lowering himself back to the floor. Try to sleep, he murmured. Tomorrow, I find out who in this block has orders to kill you. Rhys. He lay back on his bunk, one arm thrown behind his head, the other resting casually by his side. But even relaxed, he felt like a loaded weapon. What? My throat tightened. Why are you helping me? In the dark, I saw his lips twitch, almost a smile. Because, he said quietly, I don't like when people try to take what's mine. The words slid under my skin, searing and terrifying and intoxicating all at once. I lay awake long after his breathing evened out again, staring at the ceiling and wondering when exactly I'd stopped fearing him and started trusting him. The next morning, the block moved on a different wavelength. Not louder, not quieter, just aligned. A silent decree had been issued overnight, one that required no announcements and no threats. Every inmate felt it. Every guard sensed it. I wasn't just the contested Omega anymore. I was Rhys's confirmed claim, and the entire block shifted around that reality. Rhys never left my side. During yard time, he no longer watched from the high wall like a distant king surveying his kingdom. He walked with me now, a slow, deliberate perimeter that made it clear he was the wall. A one-man fortress with a singular purpose, me. When we ate, he sat opposite me, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the mess hall in constant, calculated sweeps. His stillness was misleading. Beneath it was the coiled awareness of a predator assessing every threat before it had the chance to become one. It should have suffocated me. It should have terrified me. But instead, for the first time since my arrest, I felt something shockingly unfamiliar. Safe. Maybe that was the most dangerous part. The first test came later that afternoon. We were in the library, one of the few quiet spaces in the prison. Dusty air, flickering lights, outdated terminals. I was searching one of them for any mention of Ethelberg. Anything. A name. A lawsuit. A whisper. I didn't hear the footsteps, but Rhys did. His body shifted beside me, a subtle tension radiating outward like a shockwave. I looked up. Jax stood in the doorway, broad, cold-eyed, a mercenary alpha whose loyalty went to the highest bidder, not to any king. He eyed Rhys with wary respect, and then his gaze slid to me. My stomach tightened. King. Jax nodded. His voice was gravel. Need a word. Alone. Rhys didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe differently. "Anything you have to say," he said calmly. "You can say in front of him." Jax hesitated, bold for him, but finally stepped forward. "It's about the new flow of suppressants," he said. "The ones coming from the outside. The good stuff. Suppressants." My pulse stuttered. "Ethelberg." Jax continued. "Word is there's a bounty for a certain complication to be removed permanently." The room seemed to freeze. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. Rhys stepped forward, not aggressive, not showy. Just one decisive move that placed him directly between Jax and me. "A wall. Promise. Tell your employer," Rhys said, voice low and deadly steady, "that the complication is under my protection, and the price for touching him is no longer a beating." He leaned in, forcing Jax to meet his eyes. "It's me, coming for them, personally." Jax paled. He was dangerous, yes, but Rhys was something else. Not a hired blade, not a brawler, a force. Jax backed out of the room without another word. When the door shut, the tension didn't fade from Rhys's shoulders. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something raw beneath his armor, fear. Not for himself. For me. Elias. My name on his tongue hit harder than his touch. He didn't use it often. There was never a reason to. But now, there was. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. A soft, gentle gesture that contradicted everything everything this place made him. My breath trembled, but I didn't pull away. I leaned into him. Something unspoken passed between us. "Do you trust me now?" I exhaled slowly. My first true release of tension since entering this prison. His thumb grazed my temple, slow and claiming. "The bounty changes things," he murmured. "We can't just play defense." Fear prickled my spine. "What are you going to do?" A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "What I should have done the moment I caught your scent in this hellhole." Rhys turned, looking through the narrow glass toward the block. His gaze locked on Silas, the only alpha who could challenge him, not with fists, but with mind and influence. "I'm going," Rhys said quietly, "to make an alliance, not a king guarding a treasure, a general preparing for war." And the terrifying, breathtaking truth hit me. The yard smells of dust and sweat, sharp in the morning light. I walk beside Rhys, his presence a moving wall, a silent warning to anyone who thinks to challenge us. The air hums with tension. The prisoners know something important is happening, and even the guards give the yard a wide berth. We reach the rusted metal table in the center of the yard. Silas is already there, calm and unreadable, flanked by a wiry, quiet man who moves like a shadow. The space between us feels charged, the kind of tension that could snap a neck if mishandled. "The bounty is 50,000 credits, Silas says without looking up from the table. His fingers are steepled, precise. Enough for a man to live like an emperor on the outside after his release. You cannot stop a river with your hands alone, Rhys." Rhys leans against the table, his expression flat, but the air around him sharpens, cutting the light. "I'm not trying to stop the river," he says, his voice low, measured. "I'm going to dam it at the source, but I need to know which way it's flowing." Silas's eyes flick to me, calculating, as if measuring my worth in the equation we're stepping into. "You believe the source is inside these walls," he says slowly. "The order came from outside," Rhys replies, jaw tight. "But the hand that holds the knife is in here." Jax was just the first whisper. There will be others. He leans forward, the shadow of his body pressing toward Silas. "You have ears, Silas. You hear the things said in shadows. Help me find the knife. In return, you get your share of the power. A true co-regent. Not a prisoner in cell 1. I notice Silas hesitate, the faintest tightening around his eyes, but he doesn't show any sign of outright disagreement. Rhys is offering him an equal seat at the table, and yet neither of them can forget the thousands of invisible moves that led here. "And the Omega?" Silas asks finally, voice soft but carrying across the metal yard. A low growl vibrates in Rhys's chest, instinctive, primal. "He is not part of the negotiation," Rhys says firmly, his eyes sweeping over me like a shield. Silas tilts his head, reading more than just words. He is the reason for the negotiation, he says, and there's no challenge in his tone, only acknowledgement. Rhys straightens, looking at Silas, and for a moment, they measure each other like two kings on a chessboard. Then Silas inclines his head and extends a hand. Rhys takes it, the grip tight, deliberate. An unspoken truce, a promise of mutual survival, not friendship. As we step away from the table, Rhys's hand slides to the small of my back. A steady pressure, grounding. It isn't a claim this time, not the possessive dominance I've come to expect. It's a message in silence. We are in this together. Weeks passed, and the alliance began to bear fruit. Silas's network uncovered a corrupt guard on Ethelberg's payroll. The threat was now identified, but a new kind of pressure settled over me. The gnawing fear that came not from an enemy, but from the unknown. Nightmares haunted my sleep, leaving me gasping and drenched in cold sweat, my fear lingering like a scent in the cell. One night, I woke from a particularly vivid nightmare. My chest heaved, my hands trembling, the room spinning in the dim light. Before I could fully orient myself, Rhys was there, sitting on the edge of my bunk, his presence grounding, solid, impossible to ignore. "Breathe, Elias," he commanded, his voice low and unwavering. "I can't," I choked, heart hammering. "You can." His hand pressed firmly between my shoulder blades, guiding me. In. He inhaled slowly. I mimicked him. Out. His rhythm was steady, a lifeline. Minutes passed as I struggled to match him. Gradually, my panicked breaths eased into a shaky, hollow calm. I slumped forward, resting my forehead against his shoulder. He remained still, an anchor, letting me settle without forcing comfort. The warmth of his body, the familiar scent of wood smoke and earth, no longer threatened me. It was safety. "Tell me," he murmured, his voice a soft vibration against my skin. I spoke haltingly at first, then in a rush. I recounted the late nights at the terminal, the dread when decrypting files, the terror of my arrest, and the cold reality of the bounty on my head. I clung to the fabric of his shirt, raw and exhausted. He listened, silent and unwavering. When I finally stopped, his arm wrapped around me, pulling me close. It was not desire. It was protection, a fortress against a world that wanted to break me. "No one will take you from me," he vowed, his voice a low, absolute rumble into my hair. "I would burn this entire place to the ground before that happens." I believed him fully, and in that quiet, dark cell, I realized I would help him light the match. Weeks of planning, whispers, and strategy lay ahead, but the bond between us, unspoken yet unbreakable, was now our foundation. Weeks passed, settling into a new, tense rhythm. The investigation continued, but something deeper had changed between him and me. The rigid lines of King and Omega had begun to blur, the boundaries that once defined us slowly eroding under the weight of shared danger and forced proximity. I started helping him more directly. My analyst's mind, once used to expose corporate fraud, was now turned toward the prison's ecosystem. I mapped alliances, charted the flow of contraband, tracked patterns in guard rotations, and flagged inconsistencies in supply logs. Even Silas's network missed things I noticed. Rhys took every word seriously, his eyes sharpening with approval each time I pointed to a detail he had overlooked. One evening, we sat close together on Rhys's bunk, hunched over a rough diagram I had sketched of the prison's aging electrical grid using scraps of maintenance logs. Our shoulders brushed as we leaned over the page, our heads nearly touching. "This junction box here," I said, tapping the smudged outline, "creates a blind spot between rotations. If someone created a distraction during shift change." He didn't look at the paper. He was looking at me. "You're brilliant," he said. The words simple, quiet, and without an ounce of flattery, pure sincerity. Heat crept up my neck. Praise meant nothing from most men, but from him, ruthless, calculating, impossibly controlled, it felt precious. Undeniable. His hand lifted, fingers brushing my chin, tilting my face up toward his. the breath stilled in my chest. His eyes held none of the cold fury or iron command I had grown accustomed to. The darkness was there, yes, but softened, warmer, vulnerable. "Elias," he whispered, my name leaving him like a confession. Before I could respond, he closed the distance. Then he kissed me. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming, yes, but more than that, it was an unveiling. A truth neither of us had spoken aloud, made wordless and undeniable through the press of his mouth against mine. It was fierce, urgent, a collision forged from shared danger and forbidden longing. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathless. His forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling. "I don't protect you only because you're mine," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed anyone to hear. "I protect you because you are you. And I—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I saw everything in his eyes. The devotion, the fear, the tenderness buried beneath layers of dominance and violence. The king had fallen for his treasure. And I, the terrified, hunted Omega, had fallen for my king. The final move came faster than we expected. Silas's man had uncovered the plot. The corrupt guard was planning a tragic accident in the industrial laundry during the next lockdown. We didn't wait for it to happen. We acted. The plan fell perfectly into place. Rhys's raw strength and authority, Silas's network of eyes and ears, and my strategy, honed from years of analysis. On the night of the staged accident, Rhys led his most loyal men to intercept the corrupt guard and the inmate he had hired, while Silas's faction created a diversion, drawing the attention of the rest of the staff. 10 chaotic, brutal minutes later, it was over. The evidence, stacks of credits, recorded conversations, was handed to a warden who wasn't on Ethelberg's payroll. The traitors were dragged away, their plans dismantled before they could harm a single innocent soul. When the block fell quiet, Rhys found me in our cell. He was breathing heavily, a fresh cut marking his brow, but his eyes were steady, clear, alive. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and pulled me into a crushing embrace, burying his face in my neck, inhaling my scent like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "It's over," he breathed, his voice rough. "It's finally over, Elias." But even as his arms held me, I knew it wasn't quite the end. Not yet. With the internal threat neutralized, my case was reopened. The digital evidence I had hidden in a secure vault resurfaced. Ethelberg Pharmaceuticals was exposed. The warden's corruption was documented. My name was cleared. I was free. The day of my release arrived bright and merciless. The sun felt sharp on my skin, alien and overwhelming. I stood at the prison gates, hands shaking slightly, heart hammering, and tried to remember how to breathe outside these walls. Rhys was beside me, his presence still solid and fierce, but different. Out here, he was no longer the king of Cellblock B. He was just a man who had survived every fight, every threat, every rule, and still cared for me. He glanced at the wide-open world, then back at me, uncertainty flickering in his dark eyes. "Elias." I didn't wait for him to finish. I reached out, taking his hand in mine, lacing our fingers together. The same hand that had once claimed my scent now held mine with a question. "You told me I belonged to a king," I said, my voice steady despite the quake in my chest. "But you were wrong." His expression fell, a shadow of hurt crossing his face. I squeezed his hand tighter. "A king rules a territory, but you have my heart. That's not a territory you rule. It's a gift you hold, and I'm not giving it back." His eyes softened, the weight of the prison and the title of king melting away. Relief spread across his face, slow and raw. The last of the hardness, the armor he wore for years, dissolved. He lifted our entwined hands and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. A promise, a tether. "Then let's go home," he murmured. And we did, step by step, side by side, leaving the gates and the shadows behind. No longer an Omega following his alpha, no longer a prisoner finding freedom. We were 2 men, forged in the darkest of places, moving into the light together.